When you think of Ladakh, what comes to mind? Probably peaceful monasteries, right? Breathtaking mountain landscapes. But lately, this incredibly tranquil region has become a hotbed of intense protest. So what on earth is going on? To really get what's happening now, we have to wrap our heads around a pretty big paradox. How did a moment of pure celebration, a dream that had finally come true just a few years ago, sour into this feeling of profound betrayal? You see, back in 2019, Ladakhis were literally dancing in the streets. They were celebrating what they saw as a massive victory, becoming their own union territory, something they'd wanted for decades. Fast forward to today, and that joy is completely gone. It's been replaced by mass protests and a really deep sense of distrust. So the big question is, what went so horribly wrong? All right, so our story really starts with the events that completely shattered this image of a peaceful paradise and put Ladakh in the headlines for all the wrong reasons. Last September, things just exploded. What started as peaceful demonstrations erupted into violence, and the consequences were absolutely tragic. People died, dozens were injured, and in a huge sign of just how angry people were, a ruling party office was set on fire. The government's response? It was swift and it was severe, leading to a move that really shocked a lot of people. The arrest of a globally respected activist under a very strict national security law. But, to really feel that anger, that sense of betrayal, we've got to rewind a bit. We need to understand why becoming a union territory was at one point seen as this incredible, historic victory. For decades, you have to understand, Ladakhis felt like they were on the back burner, a forgotten part of the old state of Jammu and Kashmir. They felt that all the political power, all the development money was going to the Kashmir Valley. They even had a name for it. They called it stepmotherly treatment. Their solution? It was simple, really. They wanted direct rule from the central government as a union territory. And then, in 2019, it happened. The central government abrogated Article 370. And in doing so, it gave Ladakh exactly what it had been fighting for, its own separate identity as a union territory. This wasn't just some political reshuffling. This was the dream of generations coming true. The celebrations were real, and they were massive. And right at the center of all this is a face many of you might recognize, Sonam Wangchuk. Yeah, the same guy who inspired the movie 3 Idiots, a celebrated innovator, an educational genius. But now, that same man is leading hunger strikes and has been labeled an agitator by the government. His personal journey, in a way, is Ladakh's journey in miniature, from a hopeful partner to a determined protester. Okay, so what is this all about? What are the protesters actually fighting for? Well, it all boils down to a few key constitutional safeguards that they believe are just essential for their survival. The big one, the central demand that kicked this whole thing off, is their inclusion in the 6th schedule of the Indian Constitution. And for the people protesting, this isn't some new idea they just came up with. They say it was a fundamental promise made to them when their union territory was first created. So what even is the 6th schedule? Well, think of it like a constitutional shield. It's a special tool designed for regions with large tribal populations, and it gives them significant power to govern themselves, to make sure they can protect their unique identity and their way of life. And we're not talking about something abstract here. This is about real, tangible control over the things that matter most: their land and their very fragile environment, their unique culture and traditions, their local village governments, and critically, jobs for their own people. And why is this so critical for them? Well, get this. Over 90% of Ladakh's population is officially classified as tribal. So for them, the 6th schedule isn't just some political bargaining chip. They see it as a matter of survival, a necessary shield to protect who they are from outside pressures. Now, this is where things get interesting. When the government pushed back, saying the 6th schedule was really only meant for states, the protesters did something pretty clever. They turned the government's own logic back on them and added a new demand. Okay, then give us full statehood. Okay, so that's the view from the ground. But what about the view from Delhi? How is the central government handling this growing unrest in such a strategically important border region? Well, the government's approach has been to frame this not as a political disagreement, but as a national security threat. The official story blames activists for stirring up trouble, hints at foreign interference, and uses the region's sensitive location, right on the border with China and Pakistan, to justify a heavy-handed crackdown. And here's their main legal justification for that stance. They claim that, constitutionally speaking, the protections of this sixth schedule are for states, and since Ladakh is now a union territory, it just doesn't qualify. Of course, this is the very argument that led protesters to say, fine then, make us a state. But if you peel back the layers, this whole conflict is about more than just legal schedules. It's really hitting at a much deeper, more fundamental question about what representation even means in a democracy. Okay, so check this out, because this is the absolute heart of the problem for them. In the old system, Ladakhis had representatives at 3 levels: local, state, and national. But by becoming a union territory without its own legislature, that entire middle layer, their state government, was just wiped out, gone. They lost their direct representatives, leaving them feeling like Delhi is just too far away to understand their unique problems. They call it a democratic deficit. And this feeling of being powerless, it's especially strong with the younger generation. They're looking at their future and they're seeing some really big worries. Not enough jobs for educated youth, changes to army recruitment, which has always been a huge employer there, and a real fear that massive industrial projects will destroy their fragile environment. They feel like their entire future is being decided for them without them having a say. Now, I want to make one thing absolutely clear, because it's super important. Unlike some other conflicts in the broader region, this is not a separatist movement. The protesters are not trying to break away from India. They're doing the complete opposite. They are demanding their full rights and protections within the framework of the Indian Constitution. And that brings us right back to where we started, to that central paradox in Ladakh's story. What happens when a political change that promised empowerment actually leads to a profound sense of being powerless? How a democracy decides to answer that question, well, that's a test not just for the government, but for all of us.